Today's presentation is going to be about what volunteer board members wish they knew, and so it's also National Good Samaritan Day. So thank you to Matt for finding
Yep.
that for us as well.
Just
And then so for those of you that have never been on a Civic Champs webinar before, my name is Gung. It's not very phonetic, kind of like gung ho. That's easier to remember. And I am the CEO and co-founder here. And so this is a little bit of my background, but I was a tech founder for a couple other companies in the rental space and then the social media sort of management space. But I've loved, and maybe Nate can relate to this, my time here in the nonprofit sector, right? You all are
yeah.
far more nicer and more kind and empathetic and all of those things that you would imagine. And certainly to Matt's point on having an impact and feeling good, certainly helping nonprofits is more fulfilling as well. So for our guest today, we're joined by Nate, who's the founder of EasyBoard. He grew up in Nebraska, lives in Minnesota, and is married with 5 kids, knows a little bit of German. But yeah, Nate, do you want to do a quick intro on yourself too?
Sure. Yeah, you pretty much covered. I tried to put in a few like basic facts and then a few like interesting things. Um, Amazon jungle, that was interesting. Shot birds with a blow dart gun. Went fishing in the river, ate some bugs. I wouldn't do that normally, but when you're local, you do what they tell you to do, and it was interesting.
you didn't run into Jeff Bezos, huh? No, not that Amazon.
Nope, I went to a little village called Mashient. We flew in on a village in a little airplane and landed on the soccer field.
Wow.
That sounds very much like the premise for Naked and Afraid, or whatever that show is
Pretty
called.
much, yeah.
Really?
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right. And then we're also joined by Matt. So Matt's co-presenting with Nate today. And so Matt is the president of Nonprofit Courses, and he lives in Philadelphia and has taught nonprofit management. But yeah, Matt, do you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, been in fundraising for most of my career, either as I like to say, a paycheck employee or in my own business. Nonprofit.courses came out of my teaching. Found out that my students really loved videos, and yet there were too many videos out there, and so I started gathering them together. Now we got like more than 10,000 on the site. Yeah, I like you see here, love connecting people together. I find that a lot of fun, and history is kind of my thing. It's kind of cool to see how things have come together in our world.
Fantastic. And then I know a lot of folks always ask these questions, so just taking care of some logistics up front. We are going to be sharing the slides afterwards for all the registrants. We also have this session recorded. The presentation, as usual, it's going to take about 30 to 40 minutes, followed by Q&A. And then as you have questions, feel free to put them into chat. I will keep track of them throughout. So if we don't get to them in the moment, we'll circle back at the end to make sure all of your questions are answered. And as always, stay till the end. We have a lot of freebies that we want to share, so make sure you stay for that.
Yeah, and I'll kind of watch chat too, and as Matt's talking, we'll have little pause points, and I'll try to address things as we go. So we should be a good time.
Yeah. People have questions, just get them in there.
Yep. Yeah, and with that, I'll let I think Nate or Matt, I'll let you take over and share your screen, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah.
Got it. There we are, and need to.
John Sires his defenses. They try to.
All righty. Okay, so good to go?
Good to go.
All right. So folks, you're going to see me look down at my notes every once in a while just because I want to make sure I cover everything that I think is important for this. So things I wish I knew. It's really important to start with what's going on inside the heads of your board members, because you want to do this because you want to deliver their mission, right? But they have personal things about themselves that there's reasons why they are part of your board, and people come to it for all different reasons. Like, okay, I'm going to say right up front here, if you have not grabbed the book, The 7 Faces of Philanthropy, and by the way, we've got a bunch of resources at the end, you'll get emailed out, so write it down if you want, but you'll get the link. If you're not familiar with the Seven Faces of Philanthropy, grab it. It's an oldie but a goodie, as I like to say. It was based on a survey in the 1990s of people who you might say are the greatest generation, right? The World War II types, but and some things may have been flexible, since then. But it really outlined 7 major reasons why people were philanthropic, and I really think that this carries beyond their charitable giving and into how they see their volunteer time as well. And especially you're dealing with, in their case, a lot of folks who are high net worth. You might see a lot of these faces on your board, like socialites or communitarians or devout's or investors. I mean, I could go through all 7. But the idea is it's a really good framework, a good paradigm for what you're doing here. So, you know, understand why they are serving and then some of the obstacles they're going to get in that way. One of the biggest things I've seen is peer pressure. We're all social beings, right? And board members will be influenced by the people they interact with, especially fellow board members. That's important, right? If they don't see that somebody else doing something, they're not going to feel motivated themselves. If they're going to be, getting into something, they see other people really getting excited, they're going to be excited. So, and sometimes people like to be in the opposition. That's just kind of like their nature of things. Some people, go along to get along, right? But understand how that peer dynamic works in your organization. Embarrassment. Oh my gosh. Nobody wants to be embarrassed, right? Especially in front of their peers. Yet uh, they and the people they lead too, like the organization. But it could be obvious to you that a board member doesn't know something or they can't do something, right? It's just not, what they're skilled at. Be careful. How you address that issue is going to make a big difference. And, you don't want to embarrass people in front of others. You want to take them individually aside, right? But look for signs that folks aren't comfortable or are putting, or the other way, they put on a lot of bravado to kind of cover up what they may not know, or they deflect the conversations or whatever. It's really important to get in their heads that way to help you help them.
Yeah, and
And
I would
then
add, Matt, that admittedly I've been like Steve before too. He said he's been on the board for a couple months and had no orientation or conversations. In
mm,
addition to that, I was kind of too embarrassed to ask. I just figured everybody seems like they know what they're doing here.
yes.
So maybe I should know what I'm doing too. And eventually I realized actually a lot of us don't really know what we're doing here.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's totally true. And yet, whoever is like organizing this group isn't kind of perceiving that, or maybe it's just convenient for them to ignore it or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm a big one that folks should have some psychology, anthropology, social work kind of training when they do this to be able to understand that kind of thing. And Nate, you were saying earlier too, before we got on, about not understanding mission, and
Yeah.
that's a big part too, right? Is a lot of folks get into an organization, they think they know what it's all about, and yet they come to realize, nope, that's not what it's about. So having those discussions before they get engaged is really important. So that and like our friend here says, no orientation. I mean, I hope he has a good sense of what the mission is and how they serve what I call the mission recipients. Those might be students, they might be clients, they might be patients, whoever the end user is. Uh, so all this means putting yourself in their shoes. And above all, I like to say no ta-da moments, no surprises. Think of the magician with the big cape on the easel, right? Ta-da! No, that doesn't work. Um, so
I just throw out an idea there too, or something that I
yeah.
experienced that was decent, but I think it could be better. I had a board orientation
Mm,
uh, with the Chamber of Commerce. So the executive director of the organization sat down with me and another new board member, and it was a little bit easier to do it that way because we figured, okay, we're all in the same plane here. All of us are learning, and they just kind of walked us through general expectations and gave us a big board book. Now, I think where it fell short was um, they still didn't explain enough of the like just explain as simple as like, here's what we do at a board meeting, and here's what, as a board member, here's what I'm hoping that you can contribute. Um, it was more a generic orientation, like here's all our
Yeah.
board stuff. Um, but I
Yeah.
thought
In
in
fact,
general, the concept of like an onboarding meeting specifically was good as a concept rather than just, hey, here's our next meeting, show up.
well, and my red flag and what you said there was the big board book.
Yeah.
Because you put a lump of paper in front of somebody or the equivalent on a screen, and just not going to get done probably.
Yeah, well, funny enough, and we'll talk a little bit about it later briefly, but one of the reasons I built EasyBoard, our software, is because of this experience joining a board and feeling a little disoriented. One of the
Yeah.
things I did was actually went and found all the board members' photos and made my own little document with everybody's photo, name,
Oh,
and their title and where they worked, so that I had a point of reference, just context, even like who are all these people. Just a simple thing like that. And now that's of course built into EasyBoard, but I remember doing that, and then I remember later thinking back that that would be really nice if that was just provided and explained up front.
yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and something that folks don't, unless you're in education a little bit, like I've been for years, is that the human brain has this capacity, this certain limit to how much it can take in at once.
Yeah.
And think of it like if you're pouring liquid into a funnel, and there's a point at which it overflows. Everything that overflows, that's lost, that's gone. And so being able to take that board orientation, taking it down into chunks. I mean, the videos I have on my, anytime I talk to anybody about making a video for my site, it's like, yeah, small pieces, 5, 10, 15-minute chunks is where
Hmm.
people are on things. And board orientations are kind of might be the same thing, little bits over time,
Hmm.
especially with things like we're doing right now online, much easier to do.
Yeah.
So, what do folks wish they knew? They probably want to know why other people on the board are there too, right? What are the things in common between them and how they can connect to these people? I think that's really important. All right, let's move on to legal. Now,
Like,
first of all, we're not lawyers. We don't play lawyers on TV, right? This isn't legal advice. But it's essential that every board member be comfortable with the legal implications of being on your board. A lot of states have laws protecting volunteers and board members. In fact, in the resources, you're going to see the Handbook for Charitable and Nonprofit Organizations provided by the Pennsylvania Attorney General, just an example of what we have here in Pennsylvania that will help. That's our state's guidelines on some of those protections. Uh, Yet consider directors and officers insurance as well to fill in any gaps, provide additional protection, make folks feel like, okay, you guys got our back here. Now, doesn't matter what any of those things say, almost every state, and I would dare say every state, regardless of insurance or state laws, if it's criminal behavior, it's not covered. So if you're dealing with clients and there's an inappropriate contact there, or if somebody actually steals money, right, that's not covered under these things. But anything that's done in good faith for the mission, right, generally is. So the other thing I would suggest is that your board go through the same clearances, whatever clearances you require of your staff or the people who have direct contact, have them go through the same thing. They may not even touch those people or come any place near them, but I think it's a good faith kind of show like, hey, we get what you do, we understand it, we go through this ourselves, so that it shows some collegiality with the staff and with the people who are delivering the services. I think that's really important to be able to make that connection. So, what do people wish they knew? Well, unless they commit a crime, you got their backs. That's really important for folks to have a feeling that, you're not going to hang them out to dry for something they have no control over. So,
yeah, I mean, there are times I remember being on, thinking back to my board days too, and most of the time, things are smooth sailing, but the legal stuff is there for a reason because sometimes things don't go as planned. And I remember a few very hard conversations that the board had to have. We actually at one point had to fire the executive director. The
Mhm.
board was not allowed to fire or manage any of the staff, but they were allowed to fire the executive director. And there were some good reasons for that, but it was complicated. And yeah, there was lawyers involved, and we had to really process through all that things. And there was just a lot we had to learn about what are we responsible for, what are we not
Yeah.
responsible for. It would have been good to know a little bit of that up front, would have saved a little headache, but we worked our way through it clunkily.
Well, and personnel matters are probably the most prevalent of any of these legal issues that come up,
Yeah.
especially if you have a bigger organization. That's where a lot of these issues arise. There can be others, but personnel is a big one.
Yep. All right.
So
Should we go to finance?
yeah, this may be the scariest part of nonprofit board service for a couple of reasons. First, like my cousin, who was in accounting and all that for years, told me one time, I can't control the spending habits of the staff. So he didn't want to have anything to do with being on a board. He just felt vulnerable that way. Kind of gets us back to the last point we were talking about, right? But to start, right, it's important to show early on in orientation or some kind of engagement with board members the financial safeguards you have against fraud, particularly and abuse and waste and all that kind of stuff, right? We hear a lot about that today. Well, having these safeguards is essential, and everybody needs to understand that they're there, staff and board, for a good reason, right? So as long as their decisions are made in good faith, and we talked about this before, they should be fine. But confirm all that with your attorney and your insurance agent to make sure that you are going over in the financials exactly what they need to know, and have an understanding, so the board has an understanding of what they are responsible for. Now that brings to the second point here, which is a lot of people, just by nature of either who they are or what they do, have no clue about finances beyond what their household budget tells them. Do I have enough money for this or not? Am I running out of money before the end of the month? And we know that nonprofit finance is really nuanced and might even be more complicated a lot of times than business finance. So if somebody comes in and says, well, I know all about finance because I have my own business, or I run or they know it from work, it may not be the same. Accountants don't have the same rules in for-profit and nonprofit accounting. So there's even some ramp up in that realm there too. That kind of
Yeah, I
gets us
would
back.
say thinking of the onboarding, yeah, I would have loved when I was a new board member if the executive director, as part of that onboarding, would have sat down and actually walked me through a financial statement and
Oh,
explained
yeah.
what's what and let me ask questions so that the next time I see one in a board meeting and we're doing an annual review or something, it would make sense to me. Of course, that didn't happen, but I think that would have been great.
Yeah, too many times you see these documents just tossed out on the table. Everybody gets them or whatever, and half the people are kind of nodding, and the other half it's the first time they've seen it, right?
Yeah.
Whether you gave it to them early or not, and they're probably not looking at it because it's not of interest to them, because they may even be afraid of it. They don't understand it.
Yeah, and
So
it's hard to be engaged and engaged in a helpful way to provide good questions and good feedback and share genuine concerns unless you actually understand it.
yeah,
Um, and I'm probably like most people, I'm not going to bring up what seem to be basic questions in the middle of a board meeting when we just got presented the annual report. And I assume everyone else already knows this stuff. So having some of that onboarding process, having an outlet there, I think can be hugely helpful.
yeah. And in fact, my notes here, I'd say one-to-one education. That's huge. Walk them through the reports, highlight the positives, but also build trust by being transparent about the problems, the negatives. That there's nothing that helps more than if you open the sunshine to a problem this way.
Well, and you want your board members to be problem solvers with you,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So if I understand what the problems are and I understand how you think about the problems, I'm going to be able to hopefully help with that.
Yeah, these folks are not just there to overlord things. They're resources. They might, and more than yeah, you want their gift. We're going to talk about that, right? But no, they got good brains that can bring problem solving to the table in a lot of
Mhm.
ways. You also want to make yourself available to them anytime about financial questions, more than just the board meetings. Just anytime they have a question, that's essential. And then welcome them to finance committee meetings, whether they're members or not. I think it's great for other board members to feel like they can drop in on those and understand what's going on that way. By the way, if you go to nonprofitboardcourses.com, that's the board portal on my site. It's not a portal, but the place where all the board content is. And I have a specific section on finance committees. And that's so, anybody who's on this, check it out. I think you'll find that very helpful. That's nonprofitboardcourses.com. But what do they wish they knew? Well, with some education, finance in nonprofits doesn't have to be scary. That's huge, right? They don't have to think, oh, this is a problem. Oh, our pop quiz.
Oh, so show the pop quiz? Okay.
Let's do the pop quiz. All right. So I gotta say, right, I came up with this, right? And this is a Philadelphia thing, right? But name a famous Philadelphia founding father and one existing nonprofit he either founded or served as a board member of.
Yeah, you might have insider information on this. We'll see if anybody knows. If you could just post in the comments if you have any idea.
Yeah,
I
let's see.
do not know. I don't have the I didn't get
Well,
clues.
first start with who's the most famous Philadelphia founding father? Anybody have an idea? Anybody out there throwing that out? Ben Franklin. Bing, bing, bing. All right. And there's a reason I picked Ben. Okay. So Ben Franklin founded the Library Company of Philadelphia, the University of Pennsylvania. He had a major hand in Franklin and Marshall College in the central part of the state, the American Philosophical Society, Pennsylvania Hospital. Now these other organizations eventually they kind of fall out of the realm of nonprofits, but they're community things like the Union Fire Company, the Philadelphia Contributorship, which was a home insurance program, the Pennsylvania Militia, right? When you kind of got people together and said, hey, let's go, right? That was his thing. He was a leader in the Pennsylvania Freemasons, and he was president of the Pennsylvania Abolition Society. And I think this is great. So this is a guy who's a founder and a board member of a lot of organizations. I mean, he's a real model. And what did he do? He left two, what we today would call planned gifts, bequests, one to Boston and one to Philadelphia for £1,000 each to be used for education after 100 years and then after 200 years. And part of one of those bequests became the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, which is our science museum. So if you want to look to a model board member, Ben's your guy.
Yeah. So I was reading a comment here. I might have missed it. Did you say which one did he officially found?
Oh, a bunch of them. Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Was there one in particular, or those are kind of all of them?
No, those are all of them. I'm sure maybe even more, but those are the ones I just quickly found.
Yeah. Wow. Quite a guy. Okay, we got a question here or a comment from Ali. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, and I'll read it here. And yeah, it is challenging for sure. She said for NFP NGO organization with limited resources, I think it's very important to remember that the ED CEO has many responsibilities. Yeah, and the board CEO relationships is one of their many items competing for their time and attention. Not every NGO has a luxury of resource of a governance coordinator support the board. Yeah, that's a real challenge for sure. And then she says, my perspective, board members need to take responsibility for their own education and capacity development. It can be extremely awkward for the ED CEOs to manage upwards to their own employer to fill governance gaps within the board. And that is not the way the system is designed to operate. Yeah, it's tricky for sure. I've worked with hundreds of executive director EDs at this point, and so I've seen that challenge firsthand. It's definitely a balancing act. I think in general, my general experience is that there isn't, let's just say there isn't enough thoughtful strategy put into who to recruit, why should they join, and then what's the onboarding plan look like. And I like I say, even just a half hour like onboarding meeting, orientation, essentially a one-on-one, I think would be fantastic. That would go a long way. Um, and in my
Well,
experience, that's actually not very common.
and I would challenge a bit, I mean, I understand CEOs, presidents, whatever, have a lot of things on their mind, a lot of things they got to do. However, the board and leveraging the board, and I think that's the important part here. Leveraging the board is a big can really pay dividends, and even take that mission further. I see a lot of underutilized boards because folks just don't take advantage of their skills or even their advocacy opportunities, where board members can understand that if they and yeah, they need to take some responsibility themselves for some education, no doubt about that, right? But then pointing them in the right direction is important too. Maybe, I don't know, just kind of hit my head right now, is a board orienting course where you set it up on Thinkific or Kajabi or something like that, where they will run through some basic information to take that. Let's use technology to help out in that
Good.
situation.
And I mean, that's tricky too, right? Because board members are also busy and they're
Yeah.
volunteers. And so they're unfortunately in their mind, they're often thinking, how do I help this organization with as little of my time as possible? I mean, I hate to put it that way, but that's
Mhm.
kind of often the way it is. Um, but I do think, yeah, like just thinking back to my own experience, I do think even just like a half hour or an hour onboarding one-on-one would be well worth the time. It takes time and coordination, but I think it'd be well worth the time with a new board member. And even just again, even before that, clarifying like who are we trying to recruit and why, and making sure that that person is the right person for the board. I think would go a long way. And like Matt said, I see a lot of boards that the EDs oftentimes feel like they're almost dragging their board, or at least half of their board along,
Mhm.
and it shouldn't be that way. Um, I think some of those folks they need to pick it up, but they also need told a little bit more. They need a little more clarity. And I think if clarity on what their job is and what their role is and what they're supposed to be doing, if that doesn't engage them, they're probably just not a fit for the board at all.
Yeah.
But I oftentimes see the gap where there just isn't that clarity created, and half the board is disengaged. Um,
Well, and that gets me to something that we didn't put in any of our stuff here, but board mandatory rotation off and term limits, which honestly there is an argument to be made against term limits. I had a client one time who said, "Oh, we don't do term limits." And I said, "Oh, what do you do?" And he said, "If we're having problems, I bring them to the diner." And it was like, "No, not the diner." But no, but really what he was saying was that he wasn't afraid to have the hard conversation, and
yeah.
that
I've also been on a board that had a particular individual who was very influential in the community and was a very wise person and a great person to have on the board. And I don't quite know how they made it work, but they kind of like bent the rules and everybody voted him on repeatedly. I think he was on the board for like 5 terms or something when he wasn't supposed to, but everybody was happy with that because he was great to be on the board. But
well, right, that's the other half of it too. Anyhow, that's a
yeah.
whole rabbit
All
hole.
right, we'll keep her moving here. We got what, 10,
Okay,
15 minutes left here is all.
yeah. So fundraising, that's my thing. I understand that not everybody shares my passion for it, right? And especially board members who probably signed up to help the mission, not to say, "Oh, I want to go raise money," right? But there is no mission without money. That's huge. So make board members aware up front that there is a financial commitment. Now, it doesn't have to be, we can have a lot of discussion about the kind of people we have on boards, but everybody, in my opinion, needs to feel like they have some stake in the game to make a financial commitment, however big or small you guys, decide on this. You have to have 100% board giving. So it starts with your own gift, their own gift, board members, but also I would say the folks around that deal with the board directly, I think is important to have them make their own gift to the organization. Staff set giving standards, right? Because funders are going to ask whether you have 100% board commitment. And now folks oftentimes say, well, it feels like begging. Well, it's not about begging. If you think of it this way, you're bringing the resource of the program, they're bringing the resource of the finances, and both of you are partnering to help the person that your mission is bound to serve, right? So I call that 1-to-1 for that other person, as opposed to begging, which is 1-to-1 for me. So if you can get your own head out of it and get it focus on that person for both of you, it works really nicely. But
yeah,
it's
quick
about
comment on that too, Matt. I was going to say is my experience, both the boards that I've served on, I later found out they expected, oh, look, we've got balloons. Thank you, Apple, for some of their new funky effects, whatever. So both of the boards that I served on, I later found out that they expected some sort of financial giving, but that wasn't part of the ask, which I found very odd.
Yeah.
They wanted me on the board because of my connections in the community and because of some of the skills and expertise I could bring to the table, but they never mentioned fundraising. And it would have just been very simple just to say, hey, this is also part of the deal. And just to
Yep.
explain their expectations. Unset expectations in general, I mean, this is true, right, of any area of life, but unset expectations generally don't end super well for either party.
Oh,
So
exactly.
it was just kind of awkward, and I think maybe they were kind of unsure about bringing it up, but
Well,
they
and that's the thing that gets back to, yeah, folks don't feel good about that. And to be able to say it's not about us, it's about those people we serve, and that's
right,
why we're here. To have
right,
that mission focus on your fundraising. Because
yeah,
honestly, raising money isn't about the money, it's about the mission. And you need to put that in the front. The money helps the mission happen, but it's always about the mission.
yeah,
So, and besides which, there are a lot of other ways to help out with fundraising besides making the ask, because the ask is probably what people are most afraid of. So, there's identifying prospects, there's connecting with them, there's kind of bring them into the organization and teaching them about that organization, keeping in touch, thanking them, right? So, an ask might only take 5 seconds. You don't throw away the whole process for that one little part they're uncomfortable with. The biggest thing I can say is CIA. I used to teach this overseas. It was kind of fun to say, all giving needs the CIA. And people are like, ooh, what's that all about, right? It's a capacity, interest, access. That people have to have the capacity to make the gift that you want, the interest in your cause, and you have to have access to them. And it starts with interest. If they don't care about you, they're not going to make a gift either way. It doesn't matter their capacity. So get them on the mission, the interest on that. So what do they wish they knew? Nate, you're a poster child for this, right? That that there is a financial commitment necessary, and that fundraising is more than asking. And again, if you go to nonprofitboardcourses.com, I got a whole section there on fundraising for boards. All right. Next, time. We've all heard it. One night a month. Really, that's it. I used to work for an organization that was like the perpetual joke. We can all laugh at that, right? But board members are, they know that it's going to take some time, right? And to your point, Nate, earlier, I think it was great. Nothing can sour a relationship with a board member faster than unexpected things, right? In this case, time commitments. So I didn't say too much time, because if they know about it and they commit to what they have to do, they're good. We're all adults here, right? But what I find, what are the biggest time things? Board meetings, committee meetings, and then the part that maybe they don't see so much, doesn't come up, is representing the nonprofit inside and outside. So in other words, dealing with staff or other people that way, and then in the community, having to attend events, having to make a speech or say something to a group of people about why they're behind that nonprofit. Whatever that is, though, that's probably the squishiest part that folks aren't necessarily not only not aware of, but really probably not engaged with. And I'm sure they wish they knew what kind of time was expected.
Yeah. Yep, that's huge. I remember asking a lot of questions before I joined the board about the time commitment, but it wasn't really brought up. I kind of had to ask the questions. And even then I found out that it wasn't really correct. I think in part, I'm just thinking of my experiences, they maybe hadn't fully thought it through either. I mean, the executive director or the ED, they're in it all the time. Their time
Yeah.
commitment is huge. So, it maybe wasn't super easy for them to think about and then provide clarity on that. But again, I think setting good expectations on time commitment. Here's what we need from you. Here's how you can really help us. Are you able to do that or not? Because I think it's almost worse to have a unengaged board member that doesn't show up for your things than to have no board member at all.
Yeah, I agree.
You're just
Yeah.
dragging them along and they're slowing everybody down.
Well, yeah. And we're actually going to talk about that in a second. So staff board relationships, that's huge. I found that this can go a couple of ways here, right? Either the staff and board have a firewall between them. That happens. I've seen it. I'm not sure it's the best thing, but that happens. The staff is afraid of the board, right? They're board members, right? Or the staff thinks that the board is going to be their savior in case something happens, right? Oh, I'm going to go to the board about this, right? Neither of those dynamics is really good. Or probably maybe the worst one is the board thinks the staff is at their disposal because, well, I'm their boss. That doesn't fly either, right? So education is essential here, right? Think of two triangles meeting, right? You have the staff on one side, you have the board on the other. The points of the triangles meet and talk. The executive director and the board chair is where that comes together. And that when the board has things for the staff, it runs through the board chair. When the staff has things from the board, it runs through the executive director, and they work it out together. And that's an important concept, a paradigm that seems to work for a lot of organizations. Now, of course, there are going to be times when you have like finance committees, fundraising committees, where you're going to have staff be connected with board members because you're helping, you're facilitating that, and you're leveraging their expertise. And limiting your conversations there to whatever that topic is important. And then if each of them has concerns, bring it again back through their respective funnels. Does it always work? No. People need to be adults about this. You want folks to be collegial. You don't want folks to go around each other's backs. But as long as folks have a framework there, that's really important, is they respect each other's roles in the process. So remember, board sets strategy. The staff carries out that strategy in tactics, and everybody's there for the mission recipients. So what do they wish they knew? That the staff doesn't report to them, that they're not on the board to hear the staff's complaints, and that there's a process for communication that helps everybody do their job. I think that's huge.
Yep. And that's another example of where it's good to know even just the basics, even if it's just a couple paragraphs, even if you just, hey, read this, new board member, and I understand those rules, those roles, and the differentiation. That's helpful to know because, again, thinking back to one particular example that turned into be a big hot issue and a big mess with one of our organizations, it would have been nice to know how to navigate that before we were in the middle of the rapids.
Mm-hmm.
Even just at a high level, and then it would have been more clear to everybody how to jump right in and help.
Yeah. And you always get egos involved on all sides, and that becomes an issue. Where board members think they can do things they really shouldn't be. The staff members think they should have or can do other things that they shouldn't do. It can become a mess. Having the lanes all kind of, at least the lines on the pavement, whether sometimes you drive, you go over those lines a little bit, everybody can deal with it. But yeah, knowing that is really important. So,
all right,
board recruiting and evaluation. I will tell you that I think the most important committee on any nonprofit board isn't the executive committee. It's not the fundraising or finance committee. It's the board member recruiting and evaluation committee. It's the committee on the committee, or the governance committee, sometimes it's called. Now, most nonprofits don't have this, and it really is at their loss. Typically, new board members are recruited on an ad hoc basis. Oh, people are rolling off the board. We need to get together a committee to find new board members, that kind of thing, right? But that's only half the job, because the other part of the job is being able to evaluate the board members' performance on an ongoing basis and having standards in place, and what should they be doing or not do, and how should they interact, right? So great board members don't just show themselves when you're ready to find them. You may not be able to bring them on board right away, right? And maybe you can find ways of engaging them that can really be helpful, like putting them on committees, or helping with events, or assisting with mission recipients, whatever is appropriate for your organization, right? But it's important to have this process involved here. Now, what about standards? Well, like any job, right? You do your best to do what's expected of you, and that often means a job description. Well, job descriptions are good. That's baseline. What I like is what I call a covenant. What's a covenant? Okay, a job description is usually a one-way thing. What are you going to do for us? And we see them in jobs, right? And the return for anybody who's paycheck employed is that money. There is no money in it for board members. So I think having something that actually says, here's what hope you're going to do for us, but here's how we can help you, and talk about what the advantages for that person are for being on the board. That now, I think having that two-way thing is essential. And so that gets back to what we talked about early on, which is learning why they're on the board to begin with, and maybe you can even tailor it to what their needs are. And now, when I say meeting their objectives, I'm not talking about contracts for business or conflict of interest things, right? But good time to clarify that, right? You go back to the 7 faces paradigm. Why are you there? And what do they want to make connections in the community? Do they want to pay back, repay what that organization or a similar one did for them? Did you help a loved one, right? Are they looking to build skills so they can take to other venues, right? Do they want you to be their charity so they can look good to their friends? However that is, right? If it's appropriate, right, help them out with it. There's nothing wrong with that. Because you want them to be engaged at a level that they feel good about working with you. And then, of course, like I said, having standards so that and there are a lot of places where you can see this about whether there are board evaluation tools out there and all that really help you understand how good their job they're doing. So what they wish they knew, the importance of keeping an eye out for new potential board members on an ongoing basis, and what your standards are for being a great board member, right? And that you got to know them well enough that you could help them become a great board member and get out of this experience what they wanted. I think that's really important. So,
cool.
Yeah.
That's our summary. So, question is, what area do you need to focus more on when recruiting and engaging board members? We'd love to hear in the chat or any other comments. As those are coming in, I'll take a look here. We've got something from Andy. He says board members need to know they don't have to do everything. Yes, I mean that's a concern too, right? Is like I joined the board. What am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to do nothing, everything, somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, there
So
can be a real pendulum there for a lot of folks, a lot of
if you
boards.
aren't good with finance, don't offer that support. Offer support in the area of strength. CEOs, EDs have to be more direct in helping board members identify what committee is best for them.
And
Yes.
and that brings up something else though. If somebody wants to learn more about something and everybody's good with that, right? If you have a finance committee of 3 people and a 4th person says, I really want to learn more about this, that's okay. Bring them in, but know that you're going to be ramping up. But yeah, good point.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Please go ahead and post them in the chat. We would love to.
We'll let folks kind of think about their questions here. Sometimes it takes a couple minutes to noodle on. Yeah, Nate, you wanted to share about how to connect with you and Matt if people are interested?
Yeah, so my information's here. Matt's here as well. As Gong mentioned, this will be shared. The whole slide deck will be shared after our presentation. So you're welcome to reach out anytime and happy to chat more about some of these things. Should we look at freebies? I jump ahead?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay, freebies. 25 volunteer onboarding essentials checklist. Matt, are you going to include that in the email, or should
They are going to get that in their email. Plus, there's going to be links to all the things I talked about, 7 Faces, and the my board page, and there was another one. I forget what it is. Anyhow, yeah. So
Okay,
that's all
perfect.
there.
Perfect. So stay tuned. You're going to get all that by email. And then the goodie from me, from EasyBoard, is 10% off your first year. If you're wondering what even is EasyBoard, EasyBoard was designed in large part because of my own experience serving on boards. So it's the easy way to connect your meetings, documents, and committees all in one place. There's no magic button, but it does dramatically help simplify all the complexities of your board. It's professional, affordable, and it's been rated easiest to use in the world 3 years in a row, which has been very exciting.
Yeah, I'm impressed at Capterra ratings. That's really cool.
Yeah, I will say I might have jumped up and down a little bit when we got the first award. So, I mean, there's a lot of big dogs out in the software space that have way bigger budgets than we have. So it was cool to be able to kind of be the underdog. So
That's
free
cool.
demo at easyboard.com, and if you mention this webinar, I can get you a 10% off. If you go book a demo, it will book a demo with me.
Tell them you're FON, Friends of Nate.
Oh, you're going to be talking with Nate, so
there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, any other questions? That's all we had for our goodies.
Yeah, I don't see any other questions for now, but maybe some other folks will still think of some things. And real quickly, right? So for those of you that haven't heard about Civic Champs as well, we are a volunteer management platform on our end, and so we work with lots of folks like Nate, like EasyBoard here. We also are the easiest to use on the volunteer side, which is probably why we find kindred spirits. And so we help everyone from
True.
recruiting, onboarding, scheduling, engagement, retention, and reporting. And so some examples, right? We have a mobile app that makes it really simple for people to check in and out online here using geofencing, right? You can quickly find that. And then we also collect feedback, which is really unique. So if you think about, how do you retain your volunteers, knowing if they actually had a good or bad experience is fantastic to give you a sense. So if you're not doing that today, whether that's through Civic Champs or otherwise, we encourage you to do so. And then of course, easy reporting, right? That's super important in terms of getting your your year-end data and all of that, right? So if you're
Yeah,
interested,
and
yeah,
I mean, and you can monetize that. You go to the, I don't know whether you do this, but the board, what is it? Anyhow, how much an hour is worth? It really, so you can see the impact.
right, yeah, it's over $30 an hour now. That's sort of the national average by the independent sector, right? And so
Yeah, independent. That's what I was trying to think of.
pretty incredible. And so, but if folks are interested, I'll put the link in chat here. Folks can always book a demo with us. But also we have some great upcoming webinars. So next week we're going to be talking about social media cheat sheets. So our team here have spent hours kind of combing through best practices and what are sort of tips and tricks that we use ourselves and also that we've seen lots of other nonprofits use. So we're going to be sharing that, lots of kind of one-page handout sort of things for you to think about, making your social media postings less time consuming, but still as effective, right?
I might go.
Then, oh, go ahead, Matt.
I might go to that. I could use that.
Yeah. And then for some of you, you might already know Rob Jackson. He's from across the pond in the UK. And so he's going to present about all volunteer managers are liars is the session here on April the 3rd. And so
Say
Rob is
something
one of our,
controversial, get their
yeah,
attention.
that's right.
Yeah.
Rob is one of our noted, experts in the space. So maybe you may have already seen some of his work. But so usually it's a paid webinar, but Rob was kind enough to offer a free one for our audience. And last but not least, we have Rochelle. She is a AFP Global Board member. And so speaking of board, but also going to be talking about good governance and the key to effective volunteer management and sustainable funding. So with that, let me see. I don't see anything else in chat here in terms of questions. So we'll kind of wrap it up here at the very end. So as always, we love to get feedback of our own. And so if you don't mind taking just like a minute here to share whether or not you enjoyed the session, or if you had recommendations for us or things that topics that you'd love us to cover here at the rest of the year, we'd love to hear from you. So anything last minute thoughts, Matt and Nate?
No, boards are fun and
and complicated.
and complicated. Right, that's a good word. Complicated.
That's right.
I mean, oh, we have a question. How do you hand a staff member who complained to a board member about HR policy?
Ooh,
Ah,
there you go.
yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think they need to know there's a process, right? That gets back to that, everybody needs to be adults about something like that. With any luck, the board member is going to say, hey, this isn't something that I can take up with you right now, and send them back to the executive director or the HR person in the organization.
Yeah, I'll say, I don't know if this is helpful, Octavio. Hopefully I'm saying your name correctly, but this is very similar to an issue that we had, and what we discovered as a board is that we actually needed to have an appropriate outlet in a channel. Because essentially what had happened is several people had complaints about the executive director. Those complaints were supposedly supposed to go by bylaws and policies, were supposed to go to the executive director, HR complaints. Well, the executive director was the one with the problem. So then eventually it blew up and came to the board, and it was all kinds of complicated, and then eventually the board did remove that individual after legal investigations and a bunch of stuff. I guess
But interesting though that in those policies they may have had, so therefore if the board member or if the executive director is a problem, then this is the process.
Yeah, I guess, maybe, it could be a broader discussion, but I would take a look at what policies do you have in place and just sort of try to figure out, and maybe this is a learning opportunity. Maybe we need more clarity and policies around what happens in cases like this. What's the board's role? Are they allowed to get involved at all? Hopefully the board member that it was contacted about it is a reasonable person and collaborative with you and trying to solve this for the best benefit.
And just some boards I've been on, or organizations, sometimes they'll have a designated board member. Often it's the board chair who's responsible for fielding those kind of questions, because it is actually healthy to have an outlet, right, for staff, because you can't. Sometimes there's things, if you're complaining about the ED, you can't go to the ED to complain about the ED, right? So having a known person that's like, hey, if there's things that you can't go up the normal chains, here's the board member that would sort of deal with these. And I think, Nate, to your point on having very clear, like, here's the questions that you should go to this person, and here's the things that maybe are not appropriate, right?
Yeah, it looks like they complained about a PTO policy. I'm looking at the comment. Yeah, hopefully that board member is willing and able to say, hey, that's the official policy and the board stands behind it, and just maybe they can say deal with it in a very positive, friendly way. But
well, yeah, I was going to say not bring more drama into it then.
I mean, our particular issue that I had when I was on a board was a genuine, like, the person needed to be fired. So it was not good. But it sounds like you might be close. It sounds like it's complicated right now, but you might be close to solving that, Octavio.
Right.
Thanks everyone for your time again. Gong had asked if there's anything else. Not really, just that appreciate your time and hope this was helpful. Matt or I or Gong, of course, would be happy to entertain further conversations around any of this. And if EasyBoard could be of any help, I would love an opportunity just to show you a demo. I think you might be pleasantly surprised at how it could help.